So it seems like we have this forever forward-thinking stuff going on. Carbureted car, 2-liter motor, but we also have fuel-injected intake on this. Fuel-injected intake, you know, we have a different linkage system that we have to work our way through. But the other thing is we want to run a European airbox for a 2-liter, which is what I have here. And there's a couple things that are different about it. One, I have to change the fitting on the breather system to the early style one that is a right angle. Not a big deal. But the other thing is this airbox is actually meant for a GT, and it's meant that the snub on the snout here would go right inside the airflow of the grill. We don't have that on a Super because we have the dual headlights. So what we did is we removed about 3 inches of it from the snout, and we put the Venturi back on. So we're going to send this out, get this powder coated so it looks appropriate. We'll re-stencil the FISPA filter information on top of it, and that'll be it. But effectively, when it's all said and done, this is going to look like it belongs to this car. It's just another little thing you have to kind of think about because it's not as straightforward as you think. One, this has to fit, but because the fuse block's there on this wall, it won't fit. So it has to be relocated to the rear just like you would if it was a GTA. It's just those little things because we're trying to make this look like this belongs in this car. And we're also working very hard to make this car what we call a sleeper car. It's going to have great performance, it's going to have great suspension, great handling, but effectively it's going to be not your grandma's Super. What I'm doing is I'm pulling the studs out of this 2-liter motor that we dropped inside of a 1600 bell housing Super. We left the studs in because it kind of helps guide the motor onto the bell housing a little bit easier. If you recall, a while ago when we started in on this particular project, I left the transmission in. It wasn't something we advised others to do, but because we have the availability to do it elsewise, we did. So anyhow, so we pulled the studs off. This is not an easy project. If you don't have access to a welder and you're converting a 2-liter onto a early style transmission, I suggest you take the 2-liter studs out before you put it in. But how we do it is we just take a nut and we weld it onto the actual stud that we are able to back it out. Now, with that said, the studs that are in the blocks are fairly high strength bolts. Okay, they're equivalent of about an 8.8 in US bolts. Now, when dealing with metric, if you remember, about a year ago, we did a segment on hardware, and I recommended a book by Deere Company. Deere Company is actually just a subsidiary of John Deere Tractors. They did this whole book on how to deal with fasteners and how to remove fasteners that are difficult. It's a great book, and I still suggest you go out there and get it. But anyway, and in that segment, what we talked about was don't confuse a metric 8.8 for the same thing as a grade 8 bolt in standard bolts, because it's not. An 8.8 in metric is about equivalent to a grade 5 in standard. Okay, so if you want to match the quality of the stud, the tensile strength, you have to go to at least a 10.9. That's what these are. Now, because we're going straight back to a bolting system instead of a stud with a nut on it, it means we're going to be threading through the aluminum bell housing. Excuse me, we're going to be threading through the aluminum block. Okay, so best thing you could do to make sure these are something that'll be willing to come out and not strip the block later is put a little bit of anti-seize on them. You don't need to coat the whole thing, you just need to get them going with that, and that's it. This will ensure that if and when that motor has to be separated again from that transmission, that whoever's doing is not dealing with it. If you're keeping that car long term, you're going to want to do this for yourself. So anyhow, with that said, another thing I wanted to bring up is radiator fluid. What we want to do when we're dealing with a car that is either A, been stored for a while, or it's going to be stored for a while until you get around to building that car, is you want to get the radiator fluid out of it. There's a couple reasons why. Even if it's in controlled climate like in this shop, you want the fluid out of the block because a couple things happens. One, you have steel that's in a full engulfed war with aluminum, and you have galvanic action where those two areas come in contact with one another. They need oxygen in order for that action to trigger, okay? So oxygen is stored in radiator fluid. So effectively what will happen is right where the stud for the head, for example, meets the block, there's literally very little that's going to happen there, but on the surface where that radiator fluid is staying still, it's allowing the galvanic action to happen. So basically head studs are really easy to strip right out of a block. Okay, so you want to get that stuff out for that reason. Secondly, the other thing you want to make sure is you want to get it out because if you live in adverse weather conditions and where this thing may be parked outside, radiator fluid can freeze, and when it freezes, it expands and it can put a tremendous amount of pressure on the block. We have seen literally motors crack just by sitting out in adverse conditions. That's your tick tip. Okay, what you saw was Ariel putting together the exhaust side of this. This is that Super that we started in on, just doing a refresh. So here's just a quick update. It has our header system on it, but what we found is to be a really good match for it is the MagnaFlow system that you can get from Centerline if you're here in the States. This system seems to work really well with it. It doesn't take a whole lot of modifications. This system is actually meant for Spyders and GTs, but you can put it on a Super, just a little bit of attention to detail. One of the things, it comes over here to the Y for a standard header or a standard exhaust manifold. So what we've done is you just remove that section of it and you move the hanger forward, and this bolts right into a header system like ours. The reason we decided to use this on this car is because I have this same exact MagnaFlow set up on my Super, and I really like it. I like the way it sounds. I like the general lack of resistance on performance. So it seems to do a fine job for us. You know, for the price, you can't beat it, especially for the fact that it's a nice stainless steel unit. It's got good resonating qualities. It's not an obnoxious sound, but it's definitely a good deep throaty sound. So once we get this 2-liter car fired off, we'll put an audio to it so you can get a sense of what it sounds like. But if you're contemplating on putting in an exhaust system in your car, this MagnaFlow system isn't a bad way to go, especially now that you know, the little bugs that they had going on with them are all worked out. It seemed to bolt right together very nicely. Good professional clamps, and it centers itself right on down to the end of the car. And I can say that is kind of unique because lately even the aftermarket stock system, we still have a hard time getting some of them to fit and getting all the clearance.